Lecture number 5 for chapters 20 and 21, and now we're really moving into chapter 21, will be a brief, well, I won't say brief, but it will be a basic overview of the immune system. And again, just keep in mind, if you're reading along in your textbook, the textbook is going to provide a lot more details, and you will receive more of an education on the immune system when you get to your microbiology course. I have been told by former students of mine who are now in nursing school that the immune system does come up quite a bit in nursing school, and so they do at times have to refer back to what they learned about it in their A&P and micro classes. So just keep that in mind. Don't flush any of your body system information out of your minds, but the immune system is pretty important. So what do we mean by immunity? And what are we talking about with the immune system? Immunity means that you have resistance to diseases, infectious diseases that are caused by microorganisms like bacteria and viruses and fungi, protozoans, little single-celled organisms that we get exposed to. Worms, parasitic worms, those aren't pleasant to think about, but you can develop immunity to those as well. You can also develop or have immune system reactions to things that are not microorganisms. So that can, as you guys know, you can react to things like pollen grains, for example, that cause allergies. The immune system has two major branches. There's the innate branch, sometimes called the non-specific branch. This is immunity. Innate means that you're born with it. It's part of you when you're born. It's already in place. And so we do have some defenses that protect us from microbes right away. A good example of your innate defenses are your neutrophils, that particular type of white blood cell that's the most abundant one circulating in your blood. Those cells are abundant in your blood. They can move into tissues where an infection is taking place very quickly, and they're very good at doing phagocytosis, engulfing microbes and especially bacteria. And they don't really care what type of bacteria you're infected with. They're just good at detecting and phagocytosing bacteria in general. The adaptive immune system or defense system is sometimes also called your specific immune system, because this is the more powerful branch of your immune system. And by specific, it means whereas this branch of your immune system may just be looking for bacteria in general, or fungi in general, or parasitic worms in general, this branch develops very specific weapons for particular foreign invaders. So it's very specific. So you develop, and by weapons, weapons include things like antibodies, and there are also cell warriors that develop as well. And they specifically target particular microorganisms, like particular strains of the flu or salmonella bacteria. It gets down to that level of specificity. And another key feature of this branch of your immune system is this immune system has memory. So it remembers what you've been exposed to before, and then the next time you get exposed to that same type of thing, it's going to respond much, much more quickly. All right, so what are some of the components of these two branches of your immune system? So here you see the innate defenses, and again, these are the things that you're born with. And part of your innate defenses are just those surface barriers. And so when you studied the skin in Biology 201, you learned how the skin, the epidermis, and other epithelial tissues in your body have tightly packed together cells. And so if you have bacteria or other types of microbes on the apical surface, that's the side that's exposed to the outside of the body or to an open compartment, if you have microorganisms along that surface, it's difficult for them to penetrate that surface and get down in here into deeper tissues. So, and that's true of your skin and your mucous membranes, so they provide surface barrier protection. You do have some chemicals along those surfaces as well, which you'll talk about when you take your microbiology class. Internal defenses, so sometimes microbes do get past those surfaces, like if you have a cut or a wound, and then some microbes are so evil they can actually digest their way through those surface barriers. And once you break through, you do have cells that are programmed to respond quickly, and you have processes that happen automatically or almost automatically that are going to help you fight off the overwhelming majority of microorganisms that your body gets exposed to. So those include phagocytes. Those are cells that can do phagocytosis. Your NK cells are natural killer cells, and they actually hunt for cells in your body that have been invaded by viruses and bacteria. That does happen at times. Sometimes bacteria are just sitting in your interstitial fluids in the extracellular matrix between cells in your tissues, but then some of them actually go inside your own cells and hide out there and multiply. And viruses always do that. You'll learn more about that in microbiology. So natural killer cells are actually programmed to hunt for microbes that are inside your own cells of your body, lurking and multiplying. Inflammation is a process that is triggered by injury and infection, and we'll talk about that. Antimicrobial proteins, we're not going to, you'll hear more about those when you take microbiology. There are proteins, many of which are kind of like your clotting factors. They're in an inactive state, always floating around in your blood. And if you have an infection, they can quickly get out of the blood and become activated and stick to, attach to a lot of different kinds of microorganisms and help your body clear them out. And then fever, when you develop a fever, that is also a response that is triggered by this branch of your immune system. And the goal of a fever is actually not to make you feel miserable. It is supposed to provide some enhancements to helping you get over an infection. All right, so your internal defenses or your innate defenses are fast, and they kill most foreign invaders. There's no question about it. Most things don't have a chance against this branch of your immune system. You know, it's not pleasant to think about, but you're constantly getting exposed to things that are foreign to the body, and you don't get sick every time, obviously. If we did, we'd be miserable and sick all the time. Then that's because your innate defenses keep out or kill the overwhelming majority of foreign invaders that enter the body. Now, some foreign invaders do get past those defenses, and in fact, the ones that make us sick, they have their own sets of weapons and their own strategies for getting around our innate defenses. That's why they're actually able to get inside our bodies and stay there and multiply long enough to wind up making us sick. So in those cases, your adaptive defenses have to kick in, and these include two branches. Humoral immunity involves your B cells, and cellular immunity involves your T cells. Humoral here is referring to humors, which is an older term for body fluids. And more specifically, humoral immunity refers to antibodies. Antibodies are protein weapons that this branch of your immune system, the B cell branch, manufactures that attack very specific things that are foreign to your body. Like you'll make antibodies against a particular strain of the flu, or antibodies against particular strains of salmonella bacteria, or you'll make antibodies against herpes viruses, and so forth and so on. They're very, very specific protein weapons. And you know, you heard about those before when we were talking about blood typing. We even make antibodies that will attach to the wrong types of red blood cells that might get transfused into our bodies. Okay, so again, some of these internal defenses, I think I've probably already talked about quite a bit of this. Cells and chemicals that are necessary if microbes invade deeper tissues. And we're going to talk more about inflammation in a separate video lecture, but the inflammation involves a response that includes different types of white blood cells, your macrophages, the mast cells that are stationed in your tissues, and then there are a number of chemicals that get involved in those processes also. Some of the antimicrobial proteins I mentioned include interferons. You may have heard of interferons before. There are some types that are given to patients who are having trouble getting over some types of viral infections, especially hepatitis infections in the liver. And complement proteins, we're not going to go into those here in AMP. You will hear more about these antimicrobial proteins when you get to your microbiology class. And fever, as I mentioned, is also a process that helps us fight infections early on. All right, the next video lecture, we are going to talk a little bit more about these phagocytic cells and this process of phagocytosis in a little bit more detail than we did back in chapter 17 when we first introduced the blood.